Hello students, you must be missing your college campus very badly. Hope you can come back to your classes very soon, but till then we should continue with our online discussions. In our today's class, we shall discuss on the human bony pelvis. Now this is a presentation made with animations. If you think it's going too fast, please play this video in a slower mode. Now whenever you refer to the pelvis, please mention the term bony. Whenever you're referring to the bony pelvis, don't miss the term bony. Now what is pelvis? This should be your first question. The pelvis is a ring of bone made up of hip bones at the sides and at the front, and the sacrococcygeal part of the vertebral column at the posterior aspect. Now here you can see the ring of bone. The two red semicircles represent the hip bones, and the yellow one represents the sacrococcygeal bone at the posterior aspect. And here you have the three joints of the bony pelvis: the symphysis pubis, the sacrococcygeal, and the sacroiliac joints. Now in Latin, the word pelvis means basin. So the pelvis is actually shaped like a basin. Now in this slide you can see the two important ligaments that should be mentioned along with the bony framework. They are the sacrotuberous ligaments and the sacrospinous ligament. On the left hand side you have a view from the back, and on the right hand side you have a view from the front. So these are the ligaments in the framework of the bony pelvis. Now we will come across two terms, true pelvis and false pelvis. This can be baffling. Now the pelvic brim or the pelvic inlet divides the pelvis into upper and wider greater pelvis, also known as the false pelvis, and lower and narrower lesser pelvis, also known as the true pelvis. Now what is pelvic brim and pelvic inlet? Are they same? No. The pelvic inlet is the aperture leading from the abdominal cavity to the pelvic cavity, and the pelvic brim is the edge of the inlet formed by contributions of the sacrum and the hip bones of both sides. Okay, we will have more discussions with slides on these two topics. Now, formation of the pelvic brim. We enumerate the structures that form the pelvic brim from behind to forwards: the sacral promontory, the anterior margin of both ali of sacrum, the arcuate lines of both sides, the iliopubic eminence, the pectineal lines or pecten pubis, the pubic crest of both sides, and lastly the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. Now linea terminalis refers to the arcuate line plus the pecten pubis plus the pubic crest. In some books the upper margin of the symphysis pubis is also included. Now here you can see the structures depicted by different colors. The sacral promontory in yellow, the anterior margin of the ala of the sacrum in green, the arcuate line in red, the iliopubic eminence between the arcuate line and the pecten pubis. The pecten pubis is in blue, and the pubic crest and the symphysis pubis in violet. Now the yellow line that has appeared, it is actually the linea terminalis, made up of the arcuate line, the iliopubic eminence along with the pecten pubis and the pubic crest. Now here appears the pelvic brim in total. The entire pelvic brim you can see in the yellow line. The pelvic inlet is the aperture This is the plane of pelvic inlet joining the sacral promontory and the upper margin of the symphysis pubis and making an angle of 50 to 60 degrees with the horizontal plane. This is the axis of the inlet. Now when extended posteriorly, this axis corresponds with the middle of the coccyx, and when extended upwards, it corresponds to the longitudinal axis of the uterus, and it passes through the umbilicus. Okay, so in this slide we have seen the pelvic brim, the pelvic inlet, the plane of pelvic inlet, its angulation, and the axis of the pelvic inlet. Now the functions of the bony pelvis. It transmits weight in standing and sitting position. This is very obvious. Now we shall see the lines of transmission of body weight. Here you can see that on standing position how the weight is transmitted through the sacroiliac joints along the arcuate thickening and then to the hip joints, and then it passes on to the lower extremities. Line of weight transmission is sitting posture from the sacroiliac joint, passes almost vertically downwards through the body of the ischium to the lower medial aspect of the ischial tuberosity. The second most important point is that the true pelvis protects some important viscerals. It provides surface of attachment to the muscles of the abdominal wall, of the perineum, and obviously of the lower limbs. You have read about the muscular attachments of the bony pelvis. This is the pelvic diaphragm. You can see here the three muscles which together form the levator ani group of muscles. From before backwards, the pubococcygeus, the iliococcygeus, and the ischio-coccygeus. The ischio-coccygeus is also simply called as the coccygeus muscle. You can see the puborectalis fibers. These puborectalis fibers are derived from the most anterior group of fibers of the levator ani, which is the pubococcygeus. Now the muscles of the abdominal wall, the external oblique muscle, it has its attachment to the iliac crest. The internal oblique and also the transversus abdominis. You will read about these muscles in details in the anterior abdominal wall. You have read about their attachments to the iliac crest. The rectus abdominis muscle, the iliacus, the psoas major, and the quadratus lumborum muscles. Now, these are some important muscles of the lower limbs: the gracilis, the pectineus, the adductor brevis, magnus, and the gluteus muscles. They have their attachments to the bony pelvis. These are muscles of the lower limbs which have attachments to the bony pelvis. The fourth important point is that pelvis accommodates and gives passage to the head of the fetus and the fetus as a whole in the process of parturition or childbirth. So this is a very important function of the bony pelvis, which makes it so important, which makes the anatomy of the bony pelvis so important, because the fetus has to pass through the bony pelvis. The fifth point is you can identify the sex of the individual from the bony pelvis. We will discuss about the details of sexual dimorphism in a video which will be posted to you. So, gender difference is another important function of the bony pelvis, or the reason for studying the anatomy for the bony pelvis. Now, just an important point that you have to keep in mind, that the male pelvis is a longer section of a shorter cone and the female pelvis is a shorter section of a longer cone. Now, this is depicted in the diagram. The male pelvis, you see, it is a longer section of a shorter cone, and the female pelvis is a shorter section of a longer cone. Now, how do you hold the bony pelvis in anatomical position? It is actually tilted forwards so that both the anterior superior iliac spines and the upper end of the symphysis pubis are in the same coronal plane. So both the anterior superior iliac spines and the upper end of the symphysis pubis must be in the same coronal plane. Here you can see the anterior superior iliac spines and the pubic tubercles and the upper margin of the symphysis pubis, and they are in the same coronal plane. Secondly, the tip of the coccyx and the upper margin of the symphysis pubis lie in the same horizontal plane. Here you see the horizontal plane coming and passing through the tip of the coccyx and the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. Now, the anatomical position of the bony pelvis, the third point, is the horizontal plane passing through the sacral promontory is approximately 9 cm above the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. Here comes the horizontal plane through the sacral promontory, and it is 9 cm above the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. In anatomical position, the pelvic surface of the pubis faces more upward than backward, and the pelvic surface of sacrococcygeal curves faces more downwards than forward. Here you can see the direction of the pelvic surface of the symphysis pubis and the pubic bone, and the inclination of the sacrococcygeal curve on its pelvic side. It is more downwards than forwards. This is an analogy showing the parts of the true pelvis. The false pelvis is above and in front of the pelvic rim. The true pelvis is below and behind the pelvic rim. The anterior wall of the false pelvis is deficient. Now, the pelvic outlet is narrower than the pelvic inlet in males, but in females it is considerably wider to allow the passage of the fetus. Now these are two diameters, the intercristal diameter between the tubercles of the iliac crest ranging from 26 to 27.5 centimeters, and the interspinous between the two anterior superior iliac spines, which is about 25 centimeters. Now the pelvic cavity boundaries. Above you have the pelvic inlet, below the pelvic outlet, in front the symphysis pubis with body and two rami of pubis, behind the concave pelvic surface of sacrum and coccyx, and laterally is the pelvic surface of ilium and ischium. Here you can see the boundaries. The pubic symphysis anteriorly, the ischiopubic ramus anterolaterally, the ischial tuberosities laterally, the sacrotuberous ligaments posterolaterally, and the tip of the coccyx posteriorly. So these are the boundaries of the pelvic outlet. So you can see the pelvic outlet and its boundaries. It is rhomboid shaped, the outline of the pelvic outlet, but it is not in a single plane. It is the meeting point of two planes. Here you have the anterior segment and the posterior segment. See, the anterior segment descends backwards and downwards, and the posterior segments forwards and downwards. But for all practical purposes, the plane of pelvic outlet is considered to be passing from the lower margin of the symphysis pubis and the tip of the coccyx. So this is the plane of the pelvic outlet for practical purposes. And this plane makes an angle of 10 to 15 degrees with the horizontal plane. And this line which passes perpendicularly through the center is called the axis of the pelvic outlet, and it corresponds with the longitudinal axis of the vagina. In living state, the pelvic outlet is covered by fascia and muscles of the pelvic and the urogenital diaphragm. But why are we interested in knowing about the bony pelvis in such detail? Because it has immense importance in practice of obstetrics. So now we are moving to the measurements, pelvic measurements, and we will be more concerned with the measurements of the true pelvis. These are the three important components of the pelvis, and it is how they are measured. The dimensions are taken anteroposteriorly, transversely and obliquely. Now this is important, that the female pelvis is wider, more at the outlet than at the inlet, which we had mentioned previously. It is more wider at the outlet by about an inch in every dimension. We are coming to the dimensions or measurements of the inlet. The anteroposterior diameter is also called the anatomical conjugate, extending from the midpoint of the sacral promontory and the middle of the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. Now this is the anatomical conjugate. The oblique diameters from the sacroiliac joint to the opposite iliopubic eminence, the sacroiliac joint at the pelvic brim. This is important. It is 11 centimeter in males, 12 centimeter in females. The transverse diameter is the maximum distance between two identical points on the pelvic brim on opposite hip bones. It is the widest transverse measurement across the inlet. And it is 12.5 and 13 centimeter in males and females respectively. Now, please note this, that as the transverse diameter of the inlet is greatest, so the fetal head engages with anteroposterior diameter or the longitudinal diameter of the fetal head being oriented transversely. You can see that in this picture. Again, engagement of the fetal head means passage of the widest diameter of the fetal head below the plane of pelvic inlet. The biparietal diameter crosses the anteroposterior conjugate of the pelvic inlet. Here you can see that in this picture that the biparietal diameter is oriented along the anteroposterior diameter. Now, what is this diagonal conjugate, which is about 13 centimeter in females? What do you mean by diagonal conjugate? There are two other important anteroposterior diameters. The two other important anteroposterior diameters, one of them is the diagonal conjugate, and it is about 13 centimeter in females. It is the distance between the lower margin of the symphysis pubis and the sacral promontory, and it is widest of the anteroposterior conjugates. It's important because it can be assessed clinically by a pervaginal digital examination. Now, the obstetric conjugate is also important because it is the shortest distance between the pelvic aspect of the symphysis pubis and the sacral promontory. So the fetal head actually has to pass through this diameter. It has to negotiate through this diameter. So it is the shortest. So if you know the diagonal conjugate by means of pelvic assessment by a pervaginal digital examination, then you can find out the anatomical conjugate and the obstetric conjugate. How do you do so? It is by this formula, that the diagonal conjugate minus 1.5 centimeter is the anatomical conjugate, and the anatomical conjugate minus 0.5 centimeter is the obstetric conjugate. Okay, so the obstetric conjugate is about 2 centimeter shorter than the diagonal conjugate. So we measure the diagonal conjugate by a pervaginal digital examination, and we need to know about the obstetric conjugate because it is actually the diameter, anteroposterior diameter through which the fetal head has to negotiate, as it is the shortest one. Diameters of the pelvic cavity. After the inlet, we reach to the pelvic cavity. The anteroposterior diameter is measured as the distance between the middle of the back of the symphysis pubis and the middle of the third sacral vertebra, the pelvic surface of the middle of the third sacral vertebra. It is about 13 centimeters and the plane of greatest dimension lies at this level, and the pelvis is most capacious here. The oblique diameter is the distance between the lower end of the sacroiliac joint of one side to the middle of the obturator membrane of the opposite side. That's why it is oblique or diagonal. And it is slightly more than the anteroposterior diameter. The transverse diameter is the distance between the lateral wall of the pelvic cavity of one side to that of the other. So it is the maximum transverse distance between two lateral pelvic walls. And obviously here the points taken on both sides must be identical. The maximum transverse distance is 12.5 centimeters. and these measurements are mainly taken in the perspective of female pelvis. Another important thing is that the plane of least pelvic dimension passes at the level of the ischial spines. You can see the plane of least pelvic dimension, and most cases of obstructed labor happens at this plane. Okay, so knowing the plane of least pelvic dimension is important, and here you will see that in male pelvis the ischial spines are turned inwards, and in females it's slightly turned outwards. So the plane of least pelvic dimension is obviously much narrower in case of males than in females. So the diameters of the pelvic outlet, the anteroposterior diameter from lower margin of the symphysis pubis to the tip of the coccyx, and this is the oblique diameter of the pelvic outlet from the junction of the ischiopubic ramus of one side to the middle of the sacrotuberous ligament of the opposite side. Here again the oblique diameter, in males it is about 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and in females it is 4.5 inches. This is the transverse diameter from the medial surface of the lower end of the ischial tuberosity of one side to the other, and it is 3.5 inches in males and 4.5 inches in females, about a difference of 1 inch. Now we come to the classification of pelvis. This classification of pelvis is made according to the different shapes of the pelvic brim. Most females are supposed to have a gynecoid type of pelvis, but a significant number of females also have android, anthropoid types of pelvis. The pelvic brim is round in gynecoid type. It is just found in slightly more than 50% females, and both anteroposterior segments are equally wide. This is the feature. In android pelvis, it's predominantly male type of pelvis. The inlet is shaped like the heart of playing cards, and some females also do have android type of pelvis, and they are more susceptible to suffer from cephalopelvic mismatches. However, women who are having gynecoid type of pelvis also can have difficulties of labor if the fetal head is larger. The posterior segment is much wider in android type of pelvis than the anterior segment. The anterior segment is narrower. In anthropoid type, it is an anteroposteriorly oval type of pelvis, and this is the type which neonates, both males and females, they have an anthropoid type of pelvis which is anteroposteriorly oval, and some negro females also have a predominantly anthropoid type of pelvis. Platypeloid pelvis is also known as flat pelvis. It is a transversely oval in type and is mostly as a result of vitamin D deficiencies. Now here again we recapitulate the types of pelvis that we have just seen: gynecoid, android, anthropoid and platypeloid. Pelvis can be classified according to the shape of the pelvic inlet. Now this shows the difference in shape and the anteroposterior and the transverse diameters. The gynecoid pelvis, the anteroposterior and transverse diameters are almost the same. In case of Android, it is heart-shaped, the anterior segment being narrower. The anthropoid type of pelvis, which is anteroposteriorly oval, and transverse diameter is much less than the anteroposterior diameter. And this is the platypeloid type of pelvis, which is transversely oval, so the transverse diameter is more than the anteroposterior one. In gynecoid type of pelvis, these two diameters are almost equal. You can see that in the android type of pelvis, the transverse diameter is located more posteriorly, as the anterior segment is narrower, and by transverse diameter we mean the maximum transverse distance between two identical points of the pelvic brim. Now we come to an interesting subject, sexual dimorphism of the bony pelvis. Bones are heavier with more prominent muscular impressions in males. Iliac fossa shallower in females. Anterior superior iliac spine is turned inwards in males. The lower border of the ischiopubic ramus is everted in males. Larger acetabular cavity in males. Obturator foramen is large and oval in males. In females, it's smaller and triangular. Iliac fossa is shallower. Preauricular sulcus is prominent in females. It's more after childbirth. This preauricular sulcus becomes more deep. The pelvic inlet, we have talked about this several times. Now the sacral index is an important point that you must know. The subpubic angle is another important feature. What do you mean by sacral index? It is the maximum breadth of the sacrum by the maximum length into 100. It is about 105 in males and it is about 115 in females. So we have talked about several important things in this class. We have discussed about the different parts of the bony pelvis, the diameters of the pelvic inlet, the cavity, and the pelvic outlet and their significances. We have also talked about the functions of the pelvis, and lastly we have talked about the points of sexual dimorphism of the bony pelvis, or the differences between the male and the female bony pelvis. So thank you for a very patient hearing. Hope you have enjoyed the slides. Thank you once again.